Surrendering control to God is an act that many find deeply liberating, yet it can also be incredibly challenging. It's about letting go of the need to manage every aspect of life and acknowledging that, in the grand scheme of things, there is a higher power at play that holds wisdom beyond our understanding. When you surrender control to God, you're essentially opening yourself up to His divine guidance, which is tailored to help you navigate the complexities of life. For many, this is a deeply spiritual act that requires a level of trust and faith, not just in God, but also in His plan for you, even when things seem uncertain or difficult. One of the first aspects of surrendering control is acknowledging that as humans, we have limitations. No matter how much we strive or how hard we work, we can't always predict the outcome of every decision or action. There are many variables that play in our lives, other people's choices, unforeseen circumstances, random events that are beyond our control. By recognizing this, we come to a point where we realize that trying to control every outcome is not only exhausting but ultimately futile. This realization can be humbling, but it's also freeing. When we let go of the need to control everything, we make room for something bigger than ourselves to guide our path. When we trust in God's wisdom, we recognize that His understanding of our lives and of the world as a whole is far greater than our own. While we may have personal goals, desires, and a vision for our future, God's perspective is one of eternal wisdom, and He sees the interconnectedness of all things. The wisdom that comes from surrendering control to God isn't limited to immediate solutions or what feels good in the moment. It's wisdom that transcends time and is rooted in a deep understanding of what is truly good for us in the long term. God's wisdom isn't just about solving our problems. It's about helping us grow, teaching us patience, resilience, compassion, and trust. One of the core principles of surrendering to God is the understanding that His plan for us is ultimately aimed at our greater good. This doesn't necessarily mean that life will always be easy or that we won't face challenges. In fact, some of the most profound lessons in growth come from difficulties and setbacks. However, when we trust that God's plan is always leading us towards something better, even if we can't see it immediately, it helps us face adversity with faith. Instead of seeing obstacles as roadblocks, we can view them as opportunities for personal growth, knowing that God is using these moments to refine us and prepare us for what's next. A key aspect of God's wisdom is that it often doesn't align with our own desires or expectations. We might want something that feels right for us in the moment, but God, with His infinite wisdom, might have something better in store. This is where surrendering control can be especially. It requires us to release our own agenda and trust that what God has planned for us is not only better, but often beyond what we can imagine. His plans are rooted in love and designed to bring about the most fulfilling, purposeful life for us. The challenge, however, is that we may not always understand why things unfold the way they do. In these moments, it's important to remember that trusting God's wisdom is not dependent on our understanding, but on our faith in His goodness and care for us. When we surrender control to God, we also open ourselves to His direction in our everyday decisions. Instead of making choices based solely on our own desires, we seek His guidance in all areas of life. Relationships, career, finances, and even the smaller, seemingly insignificant choices we make day to day. This doesn't mean we sit back and wait for God to do everything for us, but it means we invite His presence into our decision-making process. Through prayer, reflection, and listening for His voice, we begin to make decisions that align with His will, which in turn aligns with a greater purpose. Another vital aspect of surrendering control is the peace that comes with it. When we are constantly trying to control everything, there is a tension that builds. We worry about the future, stress about making the right decisions, and feel burdened by the weight of responsibility. However, when we trust God's plan and allow Him to lead, that burden is lifted. The peace that comes from surrendering control isn't passive resignation. It's an active trust that God is in control and we don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. This peace doesn't mean that everything will always go smoothly, but it means that we can face life's challenges with a sense of calm, knowing that we are not alone and that God's wisdom is guiding us through. Moreover, surrendering control is not a one-time decision, but an ongoing process. It's something we have to continually choose, especially when we encounter situations where we feel the urge to take matters into our own hands. It's easy to want to revert to old habits of controlling everything, especially when we face uncertainty or fear. But in those moments, it's important to pause and remind ourselves of God's faithfulness and His presence in our lives. As we consistently surrender, we cultivate a deeper relationship with God, one that is rooted in trust and reliance on His wisdom, rather than our own understanding. The act of surrender also has the power to transform how we approach the world around us. When we surrender control to God, we stop viewing life as a series of problems to be solved and start seeing it as a journey to be experienced. We come to understand that we are not isolated beings trying to navigate life on our own, but part of a greater divine narrative. This shift in perspective can bring a sense of meaning and purpose to even the most mundane moments of our lives. Every action, every interaction becomes an opportunity to witness God's guidance and presence. Surrendering control to God doesn't mean that we give up all responsibility. It means that we acknowledge our dependence on God and trust that He is working through us and through our decisions. We are still active participants in our lives, but we do so with a sense of humility, recognizing that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves. This allows us to make decisions with a sense of peace, knowing that we are not alone in the process. Ultimately, surrendering control to God is an act of faith. It's an act of trusting that God in His infinite wisdom knows what is best for us and will guide us to the life that He has planned for us. It's about letting go of our need to be in control and embracing the freedom that comes with trusting in His plan. When we do this, we begin to align ourselves with a greater purpose, one that is full of hope, peace, and the assurance that God is always with us, leading us towards something better than we could have ever imagined on our own. Trusting God's choice fosters peace in ways that are difficult to fully grasp unless one has experienced the relief and comfort that come with surrendering to a higher plan. In a world where we are constantly bombarded with decisions, big and small, the weight of trying to figure everything out on our own can be overwhelming. From career choices to relationships, finances, and day-to-day responsibilities, it often feels as though the fate of our future is directly tied to the decisions we make in the present. When we place our trust in God's choices, however, we relieve ourselves of that burden, shifting from an anxiety-ridden mindset to one of peace and assurance. At the core of trusting God is the belief that His understanding of life and the world is far greater than our own. As finite beings, we often make decisions based on incomplete information, our biases, our immediate desires, or our fears. These choices may seem logical at the time, but they can lead to uncertainty and, at times, confusion. On the other hand, God sees everything with perfect clarity. His wisdom is not limited by time, space, or circumstance. When we trust in His choices for our lives, we acknowledge that He sees the full picture, the past, present, and future, while we are often caught up in the fog of our limited perspective. This belief in God's infinite wisdom helps to foster a deep sense of peace, knowing that He is guiding us in ways that are beyond our comprehension. One of the most profound aspects of trusting God's choice is the peace it brings in the midst of uncertainty. Human beings naturally seek control over their circumstances, desiring predictability and security. Yet the reality of life is that it is inherently uncertain. We cannot predict what will happen tomorrow, let alone 5 or 10 years from now. This uncertainty often leads to anxiety, worry, and the fear of making the wrong decision. But when we trust God's plan, we no longer need to carry the heavy burden of controlling every outcome. The decision to trust in God's sovereignty takes away the fear of the unknown, replacing it with a calm assurance that God is already at work in our lives, orchestrating events in ways that will ultimately lead us toward our highest good. Faith in God's divine plan doesn't mean that we are exempt from challenges, nor does it imply that everything will always go the way we want. Trusting God is not about avoiding hardship. It is about knowing that even in the midst of difficulty, God has a purpose. His plan may not always align with our own desires or expectations, but His perspective is rooted in eternal good. Often it is through challenges and adversity that we experience the greatest growth and transformation. Trusting God's choices allows us to see difficulties not as obstacles, but as opportunities for growth, resilience, and deeper faith. In these moments, we begin to understand that peace comes not from an absence of struggle, but from knowing that God is with us, guiding us through every circumstance. Moreover, trusting in God's choices brings a sense of freedom. One of the most profound aspects of human experience is the constant pressure to get it right, choices in every area of our lives, especially when it comes to career, relationships, and personal goals. This pressure can be paralyzing as we become afraid of making mistakes or choosing poorly. But when we let go of the need to control every decision, trusting that God is leading us, a release from this weight, we can begin to live with a sense of freedom that comes from knowing we are part of a larger divine plan. It's no longer about our ability to get everything right on our own, but about submitting to a greater purpose and trusting that God's choices will lead us exactly where we need to be. This sense of freedom also allows us to be more present in the moment. Often when we are consumed with the stress of decision-making, we lose sight of the present and become preoccupied with the future. The constant worry about what's next, whether it's the next career move, relationship step, or financial decision, can cause us to miss out on the beauty and peace of the present moment. When we trust in God's plan, however, we release the need to be constantly looking ahead. We can rest in the knowledge that whatever decisions we make, God is guiding us and that His plans for us are good. This allows us to fully embrace the present, appreciating each moment without the anxiety of a what if or what's next. Trusting God's choice also fosters peace by allowing us to let go of comparison and competition. In a world where success is often measured by comparison to others, it is easy to become anxious about whether we are keeping up or making the right choices in relation to those around us. But when we trust in God's unique plan for our lives, we no longer need to compare ourselves to others. We can find peace in the understanding that God's choices for us are tailor-made to fit His purpose for our lives. We no longer have to measure our worth by societal standards or the accomplishments of others. Instead, we can confidently walk our own path, knowing that it is the one God has designed for us, and that is enough. In addition, trusting in God's choices helps us to let go of the need for approval from others. Many times our decisions are influenced by the opinions of others, whether it's family, friends, or society at large. We may make choices out of a desire for validation or fear of rejection. But when we trust that God's plan is perfect for us, we are freed from the need to seek approval from external sources. Our confidence comes from knowing that we are following God's will, and that is the only approval we need. This understanding leads to a deep sense of peace as we no longer feel the pressure to conform to the expectations of others. The peace that comes from trusting God's choices also enables us to be more compassionate and patient with others. When we have peace in our own hearts, we are less likely to project our fears, frustrations, and insecurities onto those around us. We become more understanding, patient, and empathetic because we are no longer caught up in our own worries and anxieties. This peace allows us to approach relationships with a sense of calm and trust, knowing that God is working in the lives of others just as He is in ours. It fosters a sense of unity and connection as we realize that we are all part of the same divine plan, each on our own journey of growth and discovery. Trusting God's choice does not mean that we cease to make decisions or take action in our lives. Instead, it means that we approach decision-making from a place of trust rather than anxiety or fear. We still engage with the world, pursue our passions, and work toward our goals, but we do so with the understanding that God is guiding us every step of the way. We seek His guidance through prayer, reflection, and Scripture, but we trust that ultimately His will prevail. When we trust in God's choices, we release the need to micromanage every aspect of our lives, knowing that He is the ultimate orchestrator of our future. The peace that comes from trusting God's plan is not a peace that is based on external circumstances. It is not dependent on how things are going in our lives or whether everything is falling into place. Instead, it is a peace that comes from the deep assurance that God is in control, that He loves us, and that He is always working for our good. This peace transcends external conditions and remains steady, even in the midst of challenges and difficulties. Ultimately, trusting in God's choices leads to a life filled with peace, joy, and purpose. When we release the need to control everything and place our faith in a divine plan, we are free to live with a sense of assurance that God is guiding us toward the life we were always meant to live. The weight of decision-making is lifted, and we can walk with confidence and peace, knowing that we are not alone on this journey. In the end, it is not about the choices we make on our own, but about the choices God has made for us, and trusting that His plan is far greater than anything we could have imagined for ourselves.